Right, so learning unit 6, and we're looking at the industry environment. Now, we know from year 1, and some of you would have done this at school, that it obviously is the micro environment in the middle, it is the macro environment on the outskirts, and then the industry environment obviously would be the market environment. So it's where our competitors are, it's where our suppliers are, it's where our intermediaries are, it's where the labor unions, etc. are. And essentially, this is where we compete. So we can also think of the industry environment as our competitive environment, because that's where, yes, you do get 100% if you do all 4, okay? All right, so you can see the kinds of things that we're going to look at in terms of objectives. You can work through those. Yeah, we'll do this when we're together in class, okay? So let's look at the industry analysis. So one of the challenges with an industry analysis is to actually try and figure out which industry you're in. Now, I know that sounds a bit weird, but would we argue, how would we argue this? If you think of a smartphone versus a laptop, should those two be in the same industry? Are they in the sort of mobile technologies industry? Are they in separate industries? Where would an iPad fit into that if that's an iPhone and that's your Apple laptop? It's very difficult. So the first thing you have to do is to figure out the industry that you compete in, because if you don't have the industry figured out, you could in fact be stuck in a situation that you're planning to compete against the wrong individuals, and that you're creating plans for people that potentially might not be your competitors, or you're not creating plans for people who will be your competitors. So if we think of the online shopping environment versus your traditional brick and mortar stores, are companies like Checkers in competition with Takealot? Are they in the same industry? So we've got to first of all figure out who we compete against, so that we know exactly what our plans are and who we have to make plans for, and obviously who our customers are. So in terms of defining the industry, the first question, narrowly or broadly. So in terms of narrowly defining, we would argue that Checkers would look at itself versus Pick n Pay and Woolworths and Spar. Broadly, we would look at ourselves against Takealot as well, because Takealot will obviously sell grocery type items. So you've got to get your planning right in terms of where you're competing. The second one, has some sort of convergence taken place? And we saw that. If you think of the iPhone and a laptop, a convergence would have been the iPad. So these are two industries that essentially have become one, the sort of mobile technology industry. In terms of the sort of boundaries that we consider, the first one, we have to look at it from a horizontal perspective. So we look at the range and of products and markets. So in terms of the mobile technology, there is a significant range of products that could fit into that. And then where would your smartwatch fit in? Because I know that in terms of the Apple Watch, people use it as a phone as well. So you've got to get your industry definition right from a product and market perspective. From a vertical perspective, it is to look at the supply chain. So here we look at the different elements of the supply chain. And you would argue that a smartwatch versus an iPhone versus an iPad would use the same kind of supply chain technologies. So again, you've got to get it right in terms of your supply chain. And then the last one, which is a little bit easier, is your geographic scope. And I say it's a little bit easier, and I'll put a qualifier to that. Your geographic scope is obviously where you want to compete. Is it local? Is it regional? Is it national? Is it international? And the reason I say that it's not as simple as that, because people who have websites and online technologies and the availability of the purchase of things online changes the geographic analysis completely, because all of a sudden you're not just competing with local competitors, you're competing with somebody who's sitting at a national or an international level, who can easily just through their website have people order and deliver into the area where you're hoping to be attracting customers from. Now, every industry has certain success factors. Now, whether we call them key success factors or critical success factors, it doesn't really matter. But these key success factors are the non-negotiables that have to be attended to in terms of an industry. So if, for example, we think of the fast food industry, the kinds of things that would be non-negotiables. The first one would be good quality food at a really good price, so value for money. So it means that your supply chain, it means that the quality and the way your supply chain operates has to be really efficient. We could also argue that a key success factor in terms of the fast food industry would be foot traffic, because any fast food type outlet survives on foot traffic. So your position becomes very, very important. Another non-negotiable would be turnaround time. You cannot have people stand around and wait. The idea is implied in the term fast food. So these key success factors are those non-negotiables in terms of being in the sort of mobile technology industry. Some of the non-negotiables obviously would be the fact that you're constantly innovating, the fact that you would have to make cloud technology available. It is the need to integrate your different devices. So those success factors, essentially, without ticking those boxes, you don't even stand a chance to survive the industry. Now, every industry has its own key success factors, and you need to, as an organization, be aware that you tick every one of those key success factor boxes. So the kinds of things that we need to ask ourselves is, what do customers want? From a mobile technology perspective, we know we want integration in terms of devices. Secondly, what can we do to compete successfully? And then lastly, what gives us a competitive advantage? What makes us unique? Please have a glance at page 177. Now, I really am a big fan of key success factors or critical success factors. I think they give us a really good guideline. However, in terms of what Gemma has to say, is there's some validity. It's sometimes very difficult to identify the key success factors. So if you think of the food retail environment, until recently, one of the key success factors was the idea that you have shelves and food on shelves and those kinds of things. That has changed, obviously, quite significantly. The second one, it's not always easy to see the line of sight between a key success factor and how it impacts the industry. And yeah, I certainly don't think that we think like this. So I think Gemma just is overreaching a little bit. We know that competitive advantage doesn't come from key success factors only. What key success factors for me do is they indicate the non-negotiables that you have to have in place in order to enter a particular industry. And yeah, as I said, with online technology, the dynamics within industry change what we consider to be competitive advantage. So if you think of the sort of taxi type industry, one of the non-negotiables now, and certainly a change in the dynamic, would be the idea and the advent of Uber and those kinds of places, where having some sort of app and calling people on the basis of that app makes a big difference. So there are a couple of industries that we can look at, and we can argue that, you know, these are a little bit broad, but they make sense in terms of these different kinds of industries. So the first one, mature and declining industries. So these are those industries that are operating in areas that technology is getting slightly more dated. In my mind, you know, when we think of mature and declining industries, and maybe they're more declining than mature, but the idea of movie houses, do we still need movie houses? If you are still manufacturing and selling Blu-ray discs, you're at a declining stage in an industry. So you'll see what happens is that we have to have economies of scale. We have to reduce our inputs, and we'll also see how the prices of Blu-ray discs have gone down completely. I don't remember when last I bought a Blu-ray, to be honest with you. Secondly, you've got to find the right market segment. So often for these individuals, the right market segment will be the late adopters. I think I shared with you my friend who recently died, who only got his first flat screen TV about 5 years ago. He is a late adopter. He was still recording using VHS cassettes. So those are the kinds of people you're targeting, who are now arriving and thinking, wow, Blu-ray is the future, when the reality, it's been the future for a long time. The next one is to offer complementary services. So you add extras. So you have specials. You give a range of additional offers. And then strategic innovation. So you look for new markets. And unfortunately, often those markets include Africa, where people are slow in terms of accessing to their technology and adopting technology. Yeah, in game, in mature and declining industries. So now we get to a point where we're going to withdraw from an industry, where an industry is busy dying down. Again, I don't know where to put movie houses. I also think of places like Musica, that kind of traditional store. Where do we put them? For me, I don't see a purpose for Musica to exist. But again, I have to be very careful in terms of saying that, because I know that we've got some Musica fans here. So the kinds of things that we want to do is you find those pockets of demand and you dominate those pockets of demand. Now, often it's about getting rid of last bits of stock. It's about serving those customers that are late adopters. You then adopt a niche strategy, and essentially you ensure that you maintain your competitive advantage, and you go and find these small segments where other people don't want to compete, and you start selling off your assets, and then you can withdraw from that as well. Yeah, technology intensive industries, and the key one for me is innovation. Now, from an innovation perspective, to make sure that we protect our innovation, we put a lot of weight into intellectual property, so registering patents, making sure we have trademarks, copyrights, etc. in place. We also have complementary products. So if you're in the mobile technology, a complementary product would be the cloud technology, would be the ability to integrate different things. And then we codify, and we try and make sure that we create tacit knowledge, so that our operating systems aren't obviously hacked, and that we benefit from using employee know-how, experience, intuition, and using employees in terms of our competitive advantage. And then lead time means how quickly you can get from new product to that product appearing on the shelf. And let me tell you, in terms of this kind of industry, the lead time is almost non-existent. So you have to rapidly, constantly update and be ready to introduce new products. So the time between the innovation or the creativity and that innovation hitting the shelves has to be reduced. Yeah, so in terms of how do we win the battle in these industries, the first one, we assemble allies. So we get our suppliers, our customers, our complementers, our competitors. We work with them. I mean, and I'm going to go back to Blu-ray technology, but Sony essentially made Blu-ray the standard because Hitachi had their own version of full HD and gave not as great quality surround sound and quality in terms of picture. But what Sony did in terms of Blu-ray is they essentially said, we have this wonderful new technology, let's make this the industry standard. So they gave it to their customers. They made sure that their competitors have access to it. So when you buy any form of player, it is Blu-ray based now. And then obviously we look at complementors. So you make sure that people are writing and printing movies in your technology. In terms of gaming, you make sure that people write and print games that will use Blu-ray technology. And then we essentially look for new industries, and again, you know, we are constantly looking at creating new industries, and we've seen how industries have started overlapping. So initially Blu-ray was created in terms of movies and quality surround sound. We now have them in gaming devices, and it's become the standard in terms of what we consider to be full HD and beyond that. And then we also manage our expectations, realizing that our innovations will be brief and won't last forever. And then it's perseverance, because there's so many innovations and so much competition out there that you have to make sure that you are constantly keeping ahead of the pack. And then just for non-profit settings, and this is an interesting one, considering how non-profit organizations in South Africa are struggling to survive. We look at the SPCA and the challenges associated with the SPCA's survival. SPCA is an organization, is a not-for-profit in serious trouble. So the kinds of things that you have to have as part of your sort of survival kit would be to make sure that you essentially make people realize that you are beneficial to society. But there's three ways of essentially, in addition to show your benefit to society to ensure that you survive, is the first one, strategic piggybacking. So essentially, we find ways to make up the difference between our costs and our donations, and that's very difficult. So for the SPCA, we know that they have shops and they run markets, and I mean they've always got bits and pieces in place. And then you've got to look at the kinds of goods and services that people are prepared to pay for, and then also to make sure that you have the right people around. I think the SPCA survives because of volunteers and people who are there as a calling. You look at your trustees, and you have to trust your trustees, because that's where your support will come from. You have to be entrepreneurial, and we see how the SPCA in Pietermaritzburg has had to become a lot more entrepreneurial. And you look for venture capital in terms of people who will invest and look at growing aspects that are new to your business. You could merge, or you could form strategic alliances. So in terms of these kinds of industry forces, I think in order to understand the impact of an industry, we need to understand the forces that will impact the organization. And we have to look at whether it will affect our profits, how it will affect prices, and how it will affect the organization.